I'm so glad to be with all of you here today. When the world around us is as crazy as it is right now, especially the way it feels after that convention, as Yvette was talking about last week, it's nice to be here with our extended political family. I know I really need it right now. I want to just start with a shout out to the Public Policy and Education Fund and Citizen Action of New York staff and leaders who made this weekend possible and who are volunteering to make it go smoothly. Thank you, all of you. So every year at Justice Works, it's my job to open up with a few thoughts on where we've been over the past year, what we're doing this weekend, and how we build the movement together in the coming year. And I was kind of ready a few days ago to come here all upbeat and excited about the past year, but after listening on Thursday night to Donald Trump, I will say his name, spout hate and racism and issue really a call to restore white supremacy and the power of billionaires, I kind of had to take a step back and rethink my remarks today. I spent yesterday kind of thinking about what is this moment really that we're in? And I was reminded of the famous Martin Luther King quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And I do believe that strongly, but I think honestly, at times like this, it kind of feels a little more like a yo-yo than an arc. Because I think as we move along to justice, we hit backlash, and then we get yanked backward. You feeling that? At Justice Works last year, I shared some lessons from my family's hiking trip, and I talked about how year after year, we have to slog through the mud on the long path or arc to a just world. But sometimes during movement moments like we're in, we have the opportunity to make a better path or to even build a bridge over the mud to create a path for future generations to a better world. And as I was optimistic then about the victories we could win in the coming year as the movement grew. And actually, if we do step back for a moment from this week, all of us collectively here in New York and across the nation really have accomplished quite a lot in the past year on our path to justice. And I want to pause to just give a few examples of what we've done together before we talk about where we are now. We won a $15 minimum wage for fast food workers all across New York almost exactly a year ago today. It was actually either exactly a year ago today or one day off that was won. And that was a very unexpected and amazing victory. Then we went on to win a statewide increase to $15 downstate, $12.50 upstate. Not enough, but it's a huge step forward, and we're going to go back and we're going to make it better, right? We won 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave for workers all across New York State. Something honestly none of us thought before the year started could possibly happen this past year. A comprehensive climate justice bill passed the state assembly and garnered support from 32 state senators. We're getting close. Grassroots organizing stopped 2 major gas pipelines that had seemed unstoppable. School districts all across the state have been forced to change their discipline policies because of the clear racist impact on children of color. In city after city, we're beginning to put holes in that school-to-prison pipeline, right? In the Senate special election in April on Long Island, Todd Kaminsky won, and he won despite a tirade of hate mail from the other side. Hate failed, and hopefully that's a sign for the fall. And perhaps the biggest thing I want to mention is that the movement for Black lives changed the perception and the narrative around race in this country. We still desperately need to change the actual reality of what's happening, because that has not changed. But changing the perception is step one. Mainstream leaders, including mainstream white political leaders, have had to acknowledge the deep-seated systemic racism in policing and mass incarceration. We even saw Governor Cuomo feel compelled to appoint Attorney General Schneiderman to take these cases of police violence away from local DAs so police might finally be prosecuted. It's a victory. And there's so much more. We're limited on time. There's so many more things. You all have a lot to be proud of from the past year. We even did build some bridges to the future and to a really new path for the next generation. But I think with all that's happened, with all that we've accomplished and all that's happening every day, I think that's why it also feels like a yo-yo. We're winning, but we're also suffering every day from the backlash. Now that the movement for Black lives has shifted mainstream white opinion, Trump and his followers want to change what's mainstream back to what it used to be on race. On the day of our big Fight for 15 rally in Albany on March 15th, I was on my way out of our Citizen Action office headed down to the rally when this white guy around my age walked in, and he asked about the signs in our window for 15. He started talking about how it would hurt his small business, and I thought we were kind of about to have one of those usual debates about higher wages in small business, which I was prepared for. We've been doing that all year. But within less than a minute, he was talking about black families and how some people don't deserve 15 an hour. And as we argued about it, he moved right to the heart of it. He said, it doesn't matter what you think, because Trump is going to win, and white people will take back America. This is what they believe. This is what they truly believe. Just last month, I was out petitioning door to door, and I spoke to a guy who told me he was voting for Trump. I asked him why. He said, because we have to build the wall. When I foolishly asked him, why do we have to build the wall? He said, because they are taking our jobs. And really, the conversation only got worse from there. As Heather McGhee of Demos Action said on Thursday night in reaction to Trump's speech, when you're so used to privilege, equality feels like oppression, which I think is a really deep insight, right? Yep. So that brings me back to Trump. I think it's not an understatement to say he's extremely dangerous. I just want to take a short detour in history here. In 1980, who here was alive and old enough to remember the 1980 presidential election? Raise your hands. Come on, admit it. Okay, I need your help here. For those of you who raised your hands, did you expect Ronald Reagan to win the presidency? No way, right? Until election night in 1980, most of us did not believe Ronald Reagan could get elected. How could America possibly elect a Hollywood celebrity with little depth and a somewhat veiled, more than now, appeal to white supremacy? He was a guy who led a national Republican convention that had the theme, Make America Great Again. That was their theme. And he stressed that he'd be the strong man who could restore law and order in our streets. In late October, he was still way behind in the polls. Nobody thought he was going to win. Even as it tightened up, it didn't seem possible. I sure as hell did not think he was going to win New York State. But he won New York State, and he won the country in a landslide election. I was a young organizer at the time, and almost my entire career over the past 35 years has been spent fighting to reverse the ideological transformation and right-wing corporate economic framework that Ronald Reagan firmly established during his 8 years as president. He shifted the national narrative until there was widespread acceptance of his conservative vision, reduce the size of government and destroy any programs that help low-income and working-class people. They can pull themselves up by their own bootstraps if they work hard. If they fail, it's their own fault. Cut taxes, especially for the wealthy and large corporations, because they create jobs. Markets left unregulated and unfettered create wealth and prosperity, and that prosperity will trickle down to the rest of us. And in case people didn't buy all this, he used race to divide working people and get the white working class to support him, despite how much his policies hurt their pocketbooks. Sound familiar? The president sets the tone in this country and the narrative and shapes what's considered mainstream opinion and what people think is possible. We're still, this many years later, fighting this better business climate model that Ronald Reagan firmly established. And for those of you who weren't around then, that actually wasn't the mainstream opinion before him. Even Richard Nixon believed in a guaranteed minimum income for everybody in America. That was the Republican opinion in earlier years. So during those years from 1980 to 2008, we won a lot of victories, but we didn't win the debate. We didn't change the narrative, and we continued to allow them to use racism to divide us by being afraid to talk about race across racial lines. The conservative corporate worldview dominated until Obama's election in 2008, when the economy was collapsing as a result of deregulation and greed, as a result of their economic policies. And Obama's election, then combined with movement organizing, began to shift the narrative toward a more populist message, although we're still fighting that better business climate argument still today. As conservative economic policies continued to squeeze the middle class, the public started to shift toward populism. Occupy brought us the 99% meme, and it stuck. The movement for Black Lives established Black Lives Matter as a constant reframing of every act of political violence against Black people. The fight for 15 made the need for livable wages a mainstream position. The Dream Defenders and other fighters for immigrant rights changed the conversation about immigration to a fight for families. Obama's presidency created the opportunity, and these movements grabbed it. That created the opening for more radical politicians like Elizabeth Warren and even Bernie and the political revolution. That progress, though, is why we now face such a virulent backlash. They know that they're losing their supremacy. We're winning, so they're fighting hard to stop us. So things are scary right now, but that's because they know we're getting closer to winning, and we need to keep pushing forward despite the backlash. So the question for us this weekend is, what's it going to take to withstand the backlash and win? There are many, many answers to that, of course, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from what all of you think this weekend and learning from all of you some thoughts about our directions forward. Of course, one big part of that is that we have to win elections, but that's a conversation for another day. For right now, I really want to highlight 3 critical tasks ahead of us as food for thought as we're going through the weekend. First, we have to fight and win the battle of ideas. We've got to change the story. As I said, we've been gradually doing that, but they're pushing us back to the old story. Our movements are changing the views of the majority of people on how the world should be, and we're making it possible for all of us to envision a radically better future. We need to keep moving that shift forward. That means political education for ourselves and our members and the broader public. This weekend's one example of that, and we'll have a chance to learn from an amazing set of speakers and workshops. It means being clear and explicit about what's wrong, how the economy and our democracy have been rigged against us, and the kinds of fundamental change necessary to create an economy and a democracy that works for all of us, not just the wealthy. It also requires us to be clear about the impact of structural and institutional racism and to call it out when we experience it and when we see it. We have to build a new society on the foundation of racial justice to replace the old one, which we all have to acknowledge was built on the premise that some lives don't matter. Second, while we change the story, we need to continue to build a powerful grassroots movement. We are all here because we know that when we organize, we can win. Obama's presidency may have created an opening, but change came from movement power demanding it. We've done it over and over. We win concrete victories that matter in people's lives, and we also win transformational victories that shift people's worldview and change the relations of power for the long term. We can only win if we build real power. That means building our organizations, our coalitions, and our broader movement. Let's bring 1,000 of us together next year for Justice Works, right? Yeah. And thirdly, we need to practice deep solidarity, building across our divisions to support each other and to support a different kind of world. We might fight because we're angry, but we will win because our struggles and our movements are built on love, not on hate. If we do these 3 things, fight and win the battle of ideas so we change the story, build strong grassroots power and movement, and give each other love and deep solidarity, then our work is really not like a yo-yo, even though it sometimes feels that way. It's kind of more like a climb up a mountain. Lots of times there's some plateaus, sometimes there's some valleys along the way, but we're still continuing to always go up and get to a better place. As Nelson Mandela, who was a true realist, said, quote, "I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way. But I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb." This is so true. He went on to say that one can't rest but must continue the long walk, also so true. With each hill, we do get closer to the mountaintop. So I want to thank you all for creating a path to make the climb up the mountain possible and for keeping it fun and inspiring. I look forward to continuing the long walk to freedom and justice with all of you. We're all in it together, and together we will win. Thank you.